are thrilled to present the third part of our three-part series of the Artists of the Spiritual Spaces at Temple Beth. I've taken off my mask for a little bit, though it's close by if I need to put it on, and I'm sitting in the lobby at the Beck family campus, where we will delve into the incredible artists that made this space so beautiful today. I want to share a little bit of information about myself before our class begins. Before I went to rabbinical school, I started a master's in art history because I love art so much. And I did a paper on Lee Krasner. She was Jackson Pollock's wife. And I did the paper and it was called Lee Krasner, the Jewish Woman in Her Art. And I'd been thinking about rabbinical school, and my advisor looked at me and he said, Lee Krasner, the Jewish Woman in Her Art, you need to go to rabbinical school. And so I did, but that art and that love of art has never left. And so it is a thrill to work with Susan Podolsky, one of the most dedicated, beautiful people at Temple Beth, to put together this three-part series. And when Amy Reshefsky, our third artist, gave me a gift, I felt guilty because this has been nothing but an utter joy. In the midst of this difficult time, to talk about the beauty and the art and meet these artists face to face gives life to these buildings that are very empty right now, but will one day, God willing, be filled again. I'm sitting at the Beck campus that opened in 2009 and was planned during one of the worst financial times. In fact, one of the loans that took place at this time of Temple Beth was literally the largest loan for Palm Beach County at the time. That is how difficult things were financially when this campus was built. And here we are today, just months after there have been beautiful additions to this campus, including the Kahila Center and classrooms. And the campuses are connected. As you will see, the mezuzahs that we see in our next slide remind us that we may have two locations, but we have one heart, and that heart is Temple Beth. And you will see that as we advance to the next slide.
And good afternoon from Susan Podolsky. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to our last class in the series of the Art in the Spiritual Spaces of Temple Beth. I had the pleasure of working with Rabbi Jessica and Rabbi Dan, many staff members, and such dedicated volunteers with our art task force to plan all of the art for the Schaefer campus. But there was no art task force when we began the plans for the Beck family campus. We had a wonderful aesthetic committee that was chaired by our illustrious former president, Patty Beck. And together we planned to beautify the Beck Family Educational Campus. If we could start with the mezuzot. So the mezuzot in this slide give you an idea how, again, we painstakingly chose mezuzahs for each room, each office that had a message and a meaning for our tiniest of tots all the way up to our staff and clergy. But it's really my pleasure to welcome our first of our three artists this afternoon. We are so fortunate to have Jeanette Kuvan-Oren with us. Jeanette's bio resonates incredibly with so much talent in the art of paper cutting and Torah covers and metal work and mosaics. And I could go on and on and on. But Jeanette's story began in the art world when she was in college. And Rabbi Jessica, I think you have an important question to ask of Jeanette.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to have you. Jeanette, we want to ask you about your career change and how that was impacted by your parents and how your early life really shaped the artist that you are. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is really a pleasure. I was at Bethel about 20 years ago and got to know Rabbi Singer and at the time Rabbi Kadar, and I feel like I've gotten to know people at Bethel over the years, and working with Susan has been such a pleasure. The most important thing is that I grew up down the road. I grew up in Palm Beach, Florida. And at the time, there were very few Jews in Palm Beach. It's hard to believe. But my parents felt that the antidote to our not knowing any Jewish kids was to spend every summer in Jerusalem. So my dad was a physician in Palm Beach. He was able at the time to close the practice in the summers, and we lived in Israel. And it was in Israel that I got to know everything about being Jewish. And I loved my Hebrew school at Temple Israel in West Palm Beach. And I loved everything about being Jewish. And when I got to college, I discovered other kids who loved being Jewish. But my parents had always taught me that art was a great hobby, but not a career. So I pursued a PhD in epidemiology at Yale after college. And at Yale, I met my soon-to-be husband, Dr. Dan Oren, and the Hillel director suggested I make our own ketubah because I like to do art on the side. So I made our ketubah, and people started asking me to make their ketubah. Ketubah is a marriage contract. I taught myself Hebrew calligraphy and then paper cutting. And I started making ketubot for other people. And one thing led to another. I called my parents and I said, thank you for all this great education, but I want to be an artist who makes Judaic art. And that was in 1984, and that's what I've been doing ever since. I work for synagogues all over the world, and I create fiber art, metal, glass, and I still do ketubot and paper cutting.
And Susan, I think you wanted to delve into paper cutting with Jeanette a little bit.
Susan, I can't unmute you. Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. We can look at these magnificent Torah covers as an example of some of the things that you've been able to accomplish, Jeanette, with the art of paper cutting. And as you will all soon see, Jeanette used that art again when she designed the Torah covers for both the Schaefer and Beck campuses. So Jeanette, can you just give us a little tour of how you use paper cuts to make these magnificent Torah covers?
Yes, so paper cutting is one of very few arts that are distinctly Jewish. Paper cutting is in many different cultures, but Jews adapted it because it was easily transportable. And I have been doing paper cutting, as I said, for more than 35 years. And I adapted it into fabric a few years ago. I realized that the same techniques you can use by cutting paper with an X-Acto knife could be interpreted into fabric designs. I dye all the fabric that you see for the Torah covers. When I do a paper cut design, I take fabric, I back it with paper, and then I cut it with an X-Acto knife. And it looks like a paper cutting, but it is fabric. And I found that it's a wonderful way to meld traditional Jewish arts with a more modern look. So all the fabric that you're seeing in these Torah covers, by the way, I've made Torah covers for about 400 synagogues around the world. All the fabric is dyed in my studio. It starts off as white silk from China, and I dye it, I piece it, I quilt it, I applique it, and then I finish each Torah cover. I've been going back to my roots of paper cutting since this pandemic began, because it's an art that is really fun to teach, easy to learn, and the materials can be purchased by anybody in their own, and can be done in their own home. So I've been doing a lot of paper cutting lately.
And Jeanette, if I can interject, I had the great pleasure of taking one of your paper cutting classes, and I know that you are continuing to offer them, and I highly recommend them. And I think we're going to be offering one with the Temple right before Rosh Hashanah, and it's really not that hard.
Yeah,
So
thank
as you can see, you're welcome. As you can see, Jeanette not only uses the art of paper cutting in Torah cover design, she also uses it as she fabricates magnificent metalwork on the examples of the arc doors that I am showing you here, and even her metal design at Temple Emmanuel, which I know that she worked closely with artist Gary Rosenthal. It was a collaborative joint project. If we could move to the next slide. Jeanette mentioned that one of her great loves is making ketubot, a marriage contract. But the beauty of working with Jeanette is that she works with the clients. So if we start at the bottom left, you can see Jeanette meeting with her potential clients who are about to get married, designing their ketubah, their marriage contract. Right above that is an example of a ketubah, which are two intertwined marriage rings. A cross is one of my personal favorites, especially when I learned that the couple for whom Jeanette was making this paper cut for their ketubah actually got engaged on a dock and asked Jeanette to incorporate that story in their ketubah, which you can see as magnificent. Right under that, Jeanette has designed ketubot all around the world. So she even had clients in Australia. For those of you who might not recognize the Sydney Opera House, there it is with a ketubah underneath, and in the middle, she also does very traditional ketubah. And if we could move to the next slide.
So Jeanette, I wanted to talk to you about your daughter's wedding and the chuppah. As someone who works in the Jewish world, when we have our own personal life cycle events, it's complicated because we've been to so many and we see other things, but you as an artist who have sanctified so many other people's events, you have to figure out how to sanctify your own family's event. So can you talk to us about this unbelievable chuppah and ketubah and all these elements that were made for your daughter's wedding that are beautifully featured in an article about that wedding that I read on a website, I think called Stomp the Glass. So if you can talk a little bit about this. Jeanette, you may need to unmute yourself.
Jeanette?
All right, while we're trying to get Jeanette back, I want you to notice, and just, I think we lost her, but we're gonna get her back on. Please notice that the chuppah, what's remarkable about her creations, both that arc you saw on the previous slide and the chuppah here, is somehow she takes the quality of paper and brings it to other materials. It almost reminds me a little bit of what Jodi does with painting, where something that's of one medium echoes another medium, that makes something come alive in a way that would be unexpected. We're going to keep going. And Susan, if you want to talk about Jeanette's connection with Joe Lieberman and his family design.
So Jeanette, am I unmuted? Okay. Jeanette also uses her paper cuts in designing family trees. And one of her most famous clients is Senator Joe Lieberman. And she has received this family tree back many times. After each grandchild is born, Joe sends it to Jeanette so she can add the next name. So it's really a magnificent way to show a family tree. And in the next slide, Jeanette if we could advance, Jeanette also does incredible, if we could go back, mosaics. And these are examples of how Jeanette has had commissions from other organizations, many organizations around the world. The picture on the left is a beautiful mosaic that she did with the children of Camp Ramah and staff in 2007. On the right, it shows a donor gift that Jeanette designed for people who had made magnanimous donations to Camp Ramah. And then her alma mater in 2016, Princeton, called her and asked her if she would make a piece to give the donors for the new Center of Jewish Life. And
Susan, I'm here. I'm back. I'm sorry.
Oh, great. Sorry, we missed you.
No, bad internet. I'm here if you have any questions.
Okay, we'll get back to you in a minute. I'm just talking about some of your commissions. But maybe because we talked about the magnificent chuppah that you designed with your daughter and the ketubah that you designed for your daughter's wedding. We don't have to go back to the slide because everybody was in awe. But could you just give us a few glimpses of what it was like for you as mom, as artist, to fabricate and design everything for your daughter's wedding?
A big thrill. Now that I have 2 grandchildren, and it was especially exciting then, but I worked with Sarah to design an 82 by 82 inch chuppah that would become a family heirloom. Actually, it's going to be used, God willing, in 2 weeks at my niece's wedding. So we designed it to look like a paper cut and to be on translucent fabric, so that when you're sitting in the congregation or you're a guest at the wedding, you only see the fabric that's the paper cut. You don't see what's behind it. So the sky shows through. Or the stained glass of the sanctuary shows through. Working with Sarah was wonderful. I made her ketubah also. So all the years of experience with brides and grooms really came to fruition with my own daughter. And now it's being shared, that chuppah is being shared with the whole family. So it's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. So if we could move to the next slide.
Susan, unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I did. As Jeanette had mentioned, her first commission at Temple Beth was when our beloved Rabbi Emeritus, Merle Singer, and Rabbi Karen Kadar, who was our assistant rabbi at the time, contacted her to do a special donor recognition piece. I'm so proud to have this piece in our house, and I know everyone that received one feels the same way. And if we could now go to the next slide. So we'd like to show you a little video tour of Jeanette in her studio. And Jason, we may have to cut it short due to timing with loss of internet and so on, but let's see at least part of it so everyone understands what it's like for an artist to create and work in a studio.
Hi, welcome to my studio. I'm here outside New Haven, Connecticut. So many people ask me what my studio is like that I thought it'd be fun to give you a tour. Here I am at my drafting table, same one I've had for 35 years, oops. And I do most of my creative thinking here. I draw here, I paint here, I do paper cutting here. And this is where I'm able to think creatively. Let me show you where I do my computer work. I will work on a paper cut sketch that I've scanned into the computer, and then I refine it on Illustrator. When I'm working with a synagogue on a commission, one of the things I love to do is to show them what their Torah covers in this example will look like, what they looked like before, which is like that, or and then after. So I show them, well, these are the colors we discussed, and these are the designs we discussed. So by the time they get their finished Torah covers, there won't be any surprises. When we built the studio 24 years ago, I asked the carpenter if he would put homosote board around the perimeter so I can pin to the board, I can do designing along all the walls, and I can keep several projects going at one time. I'm able to have great light down here, which is really important, and some natural light as well. And I am able to have sections of the studio designated for different projects, although I'm always reorganizing and always cleaning up. In this corner, I keep examples of work by fabricators like Gary Rosenthal, with whom I've worked on large donor walls, and David Ascalon, who makes beautiful stained glass and metal art. I also keep my collection of papers for painting and paper cutting. And this is the table that I built that I could use as a really large ironing board, as a assembly for all my fiber work, for applique, and all my sewing. Underneath I have storage. It's obviously on wheels. It can move anywhere. I'm finishing up a Torah cover here, done in a paper cut style, but with a fabric that I painted for really large projects. About 20 years ago, I discovered what is called a long arm quilting machine. After I piece the art curtain or the wall hanging, I'm able to stretch up to 14 feet on the long arm quilting machine so that the quilting can be done much, much more quickly than on my sewing machine.
So everybody, if you have the chance to take a class with Jeanette, you will be able to see her whole video. I'm so sorry that we couldn't see everything today, but we do want to leave time for our other artists. And we do want to leave time to discuss the Torah covers that you made for us.
Right. So I'm going to jump in here. So that Jeanette, you let us into your studio, but we can't go into your brain. And you have the more complicated task of going into the brains of not just one person at a synagogue or an organization that's commissioning a work of art, but going into the brains of many and figuring out how what's going on in their minds that they're trying to articulate then comes out in your work. Can you talk about the process of working with Temple Beth and the creation of these Torah covers, and how complicated there can be moments of complication in trying to understand what everyone's trying to communicate, and how do you get messages across back and forth?
So that's a great question. I always say that the most important skill with being an artist who does commissioned work is not being the best artist, it's being a good communicator and being able to listen to what people on a committee are saying. So when you have a committee of people at any organization, not just a synagogue, you have many different opinions. And we try to talk together about what will work best in the sanctuary space. And to be specific, you have this beautiful Sephardic Torah that was really important that we coordinate everything with this Sephardic Torah. So when we talked with people on the committee about what the design should look like, it was important that it acknowledge that the new designs acknowledge the Sephardic case, and that the color green would be incorporated into the new designs. So taking the ideas of the rabbi about the different messages for each Torah cover, combined with the Sephardic imagery on the Torah cover case, that's how we got to the designs of these specific Torah covers. Otherwise, the sky's the limit, but you have to work with the space you have, the community you have, and the aesthetics within the sanctuary. So it's a lot of listening, a lot of sketching, and a lot of feedback.
Beautiful. Jeanette, thank you so much. I'm sitting at the Beck campus where one of your Torah covers, which we'll see in a slide in a minute, was coordinated with this incredible arc. And you talk about your collaborations with other artists, including Ascalon, and that colorful arc that we'll see in a moment from the Beck family campus, meant to be child-friendly, that was designed in Susan's kitchen by Terry Cheddick and Susan and myself, and came alive. Your Torah cover, which we'll advance to see, will be reflected. We're also looking here at the Rimonim that have been already dedicated and some that are still available for dedication. So Susan, I'm going to hand things back to you to help us go forward.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate, a set of Rimonim are the beautiful silver finials that cover the wood on the top of a Torah, and they always have bells as if we're being called to God. So we have Rimonim that are open for dedication. Aileen Fisher, thank you for dedicating the ones that you did. And if you want to dedicate them, please call me. As we look at the next slide, we want to move to the Beck Family Chapel, which we talked about at length during last week's class.
And Susan, take a moment.
Rabbi Jessica has a question for you.
Yeah, so we just to talk about these Torah covers, which are actually at the Schaefer family campus, that are in our chapel at the Schaefer family campus, including the 7 species needlepoint that's here. And you see all the incredible congregants listed here that have been a part of making sure that these beautiful Torah covers are needlepointed. But we're going to advance forward so we can keep things moving.
And again, we have one set of Rimonim for the Beck Family Chapel. If you would like to dedicate a pair, and they will be engraved, all of them, so please contact me. If we can move to the next slide.
And that's the arc that I was referring to, designed by Ascalon Studios, this incredible, colorful, beautiful arc that mimics the Mishkan. It has that palanquin, like the way Cleopatra was carried is the way the tabernacle was carried, and it mimics that with those lines on the bottom. And then inside, Jeanette's incredible Torah cover there that reflects that. Jeanette, do you have any closing words about who are your inspirations as you do this before we move to our next artist?
I think I'm inspired by each committee that I meet with. Each synagogue has its own character and wonderful people, and I love working with all the different people that I meet. Let me just point out that both David Ascalon and I used as inspiration for the colors the actual stones that were on the Urim V'Tumim, which is referred to in the Torah. That was one for each tribe. So each tribe is associated with a symbol, like a sailing ship or a sun or a lion. And each tribe is associated with a stone, and each stone has a color. So this is very literally what you read in the Torah. And that's how, that was my inspiration for this particular Torah cover.
Thank you so much.
Jeanette, on behalf of Rabbi Jessica and me and our entire congregation, thank you for giving us your heart and your soul. And now we'd like to move truly to the Beck Family Campus, where Rabbi Jessica is sitting, and introduce to you Jodi Lee Jacovitz, who unfortunately is having a little bit of internet issues today, but she's here with her voice to speak with us. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about Jodi. Jodi started painting very early in life. She's a very well-trained artist. She's a muralist, a faux painter, and a sculptor. And Rabbi Jessica, I know you have a good question to ask Jodi.
Yes, and I just put in the chat that I am showing you her work as we speak. Jodi, it was incredible to work with you on the work that you did for the Beck Family Campus, and I'm going to walk around, but what do you love about what you do as I begin to walk around and show your incredible ceiling and mural that we'll come to.
If I'm hearing you correctly, what do I love about what I do?
Yes, exactly.
Meeting the most wonderful, fantastic people always. Everybody has different ideas and different requests. And as Jeanette had mentioned before, the best thing that we artists need to be able to do is to listen and let the commissioner tell you just what they're looking for and try to put what their ideas are on paper for them.
Jodi, this slide right now, although you can't see it, but you've seen it, has pictures of some of your
I have it on
work.
the computer.
Okay, some of your work and family. So can you just, in a few words, tell us what inspired you to be an artist from a very young age?
That goes back to the earliest childhood, where we lived with my grandparents, my father's parents, and my grandmother was a designer and fashion coordinator. She had a sewing house off their main house and often let me come in and watch her draw and sew, and to see her create these beautiful fashions was really wonderful. My grandfather, I'd wake up early in the morning and find him in the study davening. Jewish heritage was very important in our life growing up too. So along with that, I was allowed to look at many of his books, a lot of illustrations from early years that were very inspiring and caused me to be more interested in our historical background. I loved painting. That was my escape, and brought me to where I'm still now, painting for other people.
And you have so many different ways in which you paint, from ceilings to walls to bathrooms to sculpture. If we could advance to the next slide. And then there was the Beck campus. So I'm going to tell you all a brief story. Art Siegel, who asked me to chair the, Jodi, I'm going to mute you for a second, who asked me to chair the project to create and find inspiring artists for the Beck campus. I met with Art Siegel and Don Yoshino, our architect, and they said to me, we're going to have all these little pizzolas, all these little babies, all these little kids walking into our school for the first time. They're going to be leaving their parents for the first time. We need to create a ceiling that they can look up at from their strollers that will soothe them. We need to create a mural that will tell a story and soothe them. Can you find someone, Susan? And at that time, so you all know, I was very much inclined to use local artists. And so I searched the internet and combed and found Jodi. So Jodi, can we move to the next slide? Here's Jodi working on a ceiling, faux painting. You can see the scaffolding. And I know Rabbi Jessica and I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite painting and how did it inspire you?
Oh boy, as you can imagine, so many artists forever inspire me. Everything inspires me, nature, history, people, excuse me. But I had the good fortune of going to Italy with my young son at the time when he was 13. We were headed to Israel to have his bar mitzvah at the wall. And I said, can we go to Italy as well, where art originated? And we did the whole routine of seeing all beautiful works of art. And then came the day that we went to the Sistine Chapel. And I have to tell you that at that moment, looking all around me, and the goosebumps and chills that made the hairs all over me stick up, just staring up at the ceiling. I didn't care who was, my son saying, Mom, get up. I just needed to see it from that vantage point. And I just wanted to keep painting and become better and better and better if possible.
And so you, Jodi Jacovitz, became our Michelangelo. And if we could advance to the next slide. I know that Rabbi Jessica has an important question for you.
Jodi, I think you need to lower the volume on one of your devices. We're getting a little bit of an echo. So this is incredible to talk about the genesis of the Noah's Ark picture. And the two things that stand out in my mind of working with you on this design was, one, the lion and what we had to change about the lion. And two, as you can see in the Torah, and we wanted to make sure that people knew that the Noah story was in the Torah. And so the special surprise that is in the corner of this mural as well. So if you can talk about the process of creating this incredible mural that is so beloved.
Temple with designs and samples of the concept of Noah's Ark, which is universal and throughout the time and history, it absolutely is in the Torah. I wanted to have many, many drawings that had to be tweaked and changed, and like what was said by Rabbi Jessica, that we needed to have it kid-friendly. So I just went back to my illustration ideas of how to animate and change it so it's not scary, but a child would enjoy it, would want to pet it and hug it. And one of my mural painting classes back at the Institute, our instructor liked to incorporate elements from the present into the actual painting. So after meeting Rabbi Dan so many times and knowing what this was all about, it was shared that he be in this painting, reading from the Torah, showing some children that this concept, this story throughout time is right here. It's right in front of us. It's telling us that there is a rainbow at the end. There is light. There is joy. There is life to continue. There is newness. And that was my inspiration.
Thank you, Jodi. You do bring light to the children and the parents every day at the Beck family campus from the moment they open the front doors. But there were more walls to fill. And just like we created niches at the Schaefer campus, we created niches for various art at the Beck family campus.
Yes.
And we will talk about those niches in a minute after we talk about the missing piece. And it's an interesting story again. I was giving a tour of the Beck family campus to congregants, and the member said, you know, you have these beautiful niches that talk about holidays. Where's Pesach? And I said, because Pesach is a standalone. If you all can recall, it really is the most celebrated and observed holiday. Everyone goes to a Seder, everyone eats matzah. And so we didn't want Passover to be in a niche. We wanted it to be a standalone. And then the question was, well, who's going to do that for us? We need to find somebody who could paint whimsically. We needed someone who knew color. We needed someone whose style was eclectic. And then I thought of one of my best friends and artist, Amy Reshefsky. Amy and Ron Reshefsky have been Barry's and my friend for almost 35 years, since we moved to Boca Raton. And I called her up and I said, so Aim, you got children on the Beck family campus. They're in our preschool, sorry, grandchildren. They're at our preschool. Would you do this for us? And she said, yes. And then I said, would you dedicate it for us? She says, you mean like and donate? I go, might you consider that? And her answer was yes. So before we talk about my dear friend Amy's piece at the Beck campus, we'd like to look at a few of her other works so that you can understand the art of Amy Reshefsky. If we could advance, and I know Rabbi Jessica has a question for you.
So Amy, I'm sitting in front of your piece at the Beck campus, which we'll delve into in a minute. But what is incredible about your art is you're not restricted by anything. You're not restricted by materials, and you're not restricted by color. Can you talk about the genesis of that artist style that has no limits?
Hi there, everybody. I'm a late bloomer. Can you see me? I don't see my picture.
No, press video.
All right, wait, let's see here, video. How'd that happen?
Keep talking, Amy, while you're
Okay, I stopped video. I'm on video, so I don't know why I see my picture.
covering your camera.
Say it again?
Something must be covering your camera. There we go.
You are.
Got it.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so your question was, how am I not committed to certain types of works? I guess I love to, as I said before, I'm a late bloomer. I didn't start painting until about 18 years ago. I've had a lot of different careers in my life. So I guess all that comes into where I am today. And if I like to experiment with things that drive me in any direction. So like I said, since I'm self-taught, I learn as I go, and I'm not afraid of a challenge. And if I have a commission, I really can stay directed on that commission. But otherwise, I'm just free to be me. So if you ever have a moment to take a look at my website, you'll see that I've got maybe 8 or 9 different chapters of the art I do. And I work on metal, wood, glass, whatever you put in front of me. And now I'm sort of doing some mosaics, but that's really, I can't seem to stay on one style. I just need to experiment and just move on. So if something motivates me, there I go. So that's my story.
So you also have quite a freeing relationship with color. How did that come to be?
Well, something stands out in my life. I took a trip with my husband to London, and we went into the Tate Museum, and we were walking around, and to my amazement, I see this painting, and I look at it, and I said to my husband, "Doesn't that look like the painting I just did at home?" I had like done this amazing, colorful painting, and when I got up close to it, we realized it was a Picasso. And as time went on, people would say to me, you know, some of your work is very Picasso-ish. So it sort of set me in a direction with my color. And I never really, I didn't study the great artists. I really didn't study art. So, but I knew Picasso, and then and Kandinsky I read a quote from him, and it sort of put the whole thing together. He said that abstract is the inner life of an artist. And as you continue to grow, color's the key to expression. So that sort of put me in a different light also. And I realized that I had a lot of comparison to these artists, even some, not Chagall, but the color and the lightness and the movement. And so that's really what my color is all about. I can sit in front of something and just start to put the color down. I don't really know why or how, but it comes out to be something that's driven me to that point.
And that certain something really came to be with your Passover piece at Temple Bethel. So I told you all the story of how I came to ask Amy, but I think Amy has a few stories to share about what it was like to paint that painting.
And as she shares, I'm going to go in close. It's an incredible piece. And Amy, as you talk, if you can talk about the materials, I'm going to try and bring you close up to the different elements of it, because it is so full of life and vibration and incredible experience. So Amy, as you talk, I'm just going to clue in on some parts here.
Okay, so one day I found a piece of glass sitting in my studio, and I just started to experiment with the shapes of the glass. So I might have shown Susan at that point some of the pieces that I was doing, and it's all painted. You know, it's not stained glass. So as you're aware, Susan was a busy bee finding art at the Beck campus, and she came to me with this idea to paint on Passover for the glass for the lobby. And for some reason, I said yes. And I ordered this huge piece of glass and had a friend lead it for me, so it looked like the stained glass. So I was able to put it into my living room, and I placed it on these big horse benches, and it took up the whole living room. And it seemed very overwhelming to me, but once I started, there was no stopping me. So I think I accomplished the piece in like 2 to 3 weeks. And the biggest goal that I had to deal with was the Hebrew. I never studied Hebrew. Of course, so anyway, with designing the story, you work on the opposite side of the glass, and you remember as you go that every step you take will be the opposite of the real view. So I never forgot Susan saying, "Don't worry, I'll help you with the Hebrew." So anyway, so I had to do the Hebrew backwards, but I accomplished it. So I got it all done. And so one day it was ready for Rabbi Dan to come see it. And he walked into the house, and he was just so ecstatic, and he loved it. And then he said to me, "Oh, Amy," he said, "one thing is wrong." And I said, "What's that?" He says, "Well, you did the 7 plagues in the wrong order." I said, "Oh my God." So I since the glass was easy to remove the plagues, because I can just take them off and to start again. The correct, and I put it in the correct order, and I have to say that it was even better than the first time. And and then where was I? So the piece of Passover was completed, and then we had it delivered to the campus. And I can't tell you how proud I am for this piece to be hanging there. I've had 4 grandchildren go through the Beck campus, and the many more children learning about Passover. I know every Passover they come out and they look at the story, and it's easy for them to see, and it's got all the different stages all the way up to the 7 plagues. And I'm just so proud that there'll be so many generations to come to be able to see this piece.
And Amy, not only did you tell the story of Passover, but in the bottom left corner, there's a map of the state of Israel. Right. And Rabbi Dan, when he came over to your house, I remember, said, "Well, we have to put the city of Beit El in because
Oh.
Temple Beth is named for Beit El.
Totally forgot that.
Yeah.
So Amy, what was it like creating a piece of Jewish art versus a secular piece of art?
Mm. Oh, that's a hard question for me.
Or is there no difference? Is it the same?
It's the same, really. But you know, there was one thing that has happened to me many times as I'm painting. One day I was doing something in my studio, and all of a sudden, these two biblical characters sort of popped out of the canvas. I mean, it was just the strangest thing. I mean, I'd love to show you a picture of it, but I can't at this moment. But I've had that happen to me many times, and I don't know what that is and where it's coming from. I mean, I love this piece. Every time I look at it, it's like it's just two biblical men staring at each other, and I honestly don't know how it came out. I mean, I saw the form, and I just finished the form, and I have that happen to me a lot of times in my work. You can see things that it's not meant to be, but that's my life. You know, it just everything just out of me.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you are a woman of many styles, many
Yes.
colors, and many revelations. I mean,
Right.
everyone can see through whether it is your gifts to the Beck campus or your commissions for various Jewish organizations, Temple Beth and Jewish Family Service Weissman Center, just to name a few.
Right.
Or whether it's commissions for people's homes, you always manage to come out with a creative flair and style.
Oh,
So thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you
If
for
we
sharing my work. I'm very proud to be part of this.
love you. We love all three of you. So if
Yeah.
we could move to the next slide, I would like to take you all through the journey, in case you don't know, of the other two artists that helped to beautify the Beck campus. So one was Ramel and his wife, Courtney Ricarte from Ecuador. So remember, I said I was looking for local artists, but I found Ramel at the Del Rey Art Fair. So I figured I'll count him as local. Ramel spoke very broken English, and that's why he is not here today, because I thought it would be better for me to explain than he. But as you can see, he was when I saw him, he's a metal artist. And I walked up to him. I loved his color. I loved his style. And I asked him, I said, so Ramel, have you ever done people before? He goes, no. I said, do you think you can? I think I can. Now, and I also recognized that he knew nothing about Judaism. So if we could move to the next slide. Through lots of conversations and knowing the scope of his work, Ramel does the metal work, the cutting, the welding, etc., and Courtney is the painter of the metal work. And he had major commissions throughout the state of Florida and a few other states and Michigan. I said, I think he can do it. So I went to the aesthetics committee. We all agreed Ramel was going to be our artist. We signed the contract, and then it took months for me to convey, if we could move to the next slide, all the symbols of all the Jewish holidays that we wanted to portray on the Beck campus. And I would send him pictures. I would send him meanings of the pictures. And of course, I was working with Rabbi Dan and Rabbi Jessica to make sure I didn't miss anything. But I have to say, for an artist who knew nothing about Judaism, he captured, I believe, the spirit and joy of each holiday. And the other thing that we asked him to do in each of his wall sculptures was, I tried to explain to him that we are a very egalitarian congregation. We have male rabbis, we have female rabbis. We have families where there is only one parent. We have children that are the products of same-sex marriages. I said, so we have to be very careful in how we portray our families. And this goes true to the next artist too. So if you look closely at some of the sculptures, traditionally we think of men holding the Torah and men holding the Megillah. You will see that we give equal weight to women and little girls, and we give amazing weight to the symbolism and the beauty of each holiday. If we look at just one in particular, and that's the large one in the center, Shabbat, Rabbi, after Ramel gave me the design, the top was blank. I wasn't happy. And I went to Rabbi Dan and Rabbi Jessica, and Rabbi Dan said, that's easy. How do we know that Shabbat is starting? We see 3 stars in the sky. And Ramel added the stars for us. And I urge you all, if you haven't been to the Beck Family Campus, to please visit so you can see all of this art up close and personal. And if you want a personal tour guide, call me. I'll be glad to do it. If we could move to the next slide. So, Jessica, maybe you could go by the, there you go. So we saw the welcome desk when I showed you the cloud ceiling that Jodi had painted. Art Siegel and our architect, Don Yoshino, wanted to place a huge circular desk to kind of control traffic, to have a wonderful place for parents to stop and get literature, to stop and schmooze with staff who were behind the desk, et cetera, et cetera. And the desk had nothing in front of it. And we all said, well, this has to change. And we decided that a mosaic would be the right medium to tell the story of Lador Vador. And again, Jeanette, I'm sorry, but Amy, I'm sorry. Well, Amy, you weren't doing mosaics then, but we wanted to use a local artist. And she wasn't easy to find, but I found artist Robin Crossfield, who no longer lives in the area, who had a little store called Mosaica on Hollywood Circle. And I went down to visit her and I saw her work and I knew she would be the one to get this job done. But again, Robin was not Jewish. She knew nothing about Jewish tradition. And so after sending her lots of pictures and working with her on her designs, and then going back and forth to Hollywood as she was adding the finishing touches, I think she got it right. And if you'll notice, again, we give equal weight to female and male rabbis. In our bar bat mitzvah scene, we use a girl. But in the brit, right below it, we use a little boy. In our marriage ceremony, and this was the best story of Robin making the mosaic. I went down to see it. And I had already seen the pictures and she told me she was going to embellish it with flowers. And I walked in and I said, this is beautiful, but let's look at some more pictures of chupot, because I think you'll recognize that what you've designed here doesn't really fit with the tradition in a Jewish wedding ceremony. And she went, no problem, we'll change it. It came time to represent teenagers. We wanted to bring in the theme of Israel with a teacher, a Mora, singing and playing the guitar, and teens flanked around him, and the 10 Commandments in the background, because our confirmation service always takes place near Shavuot, which we are celebrating this week. And of course, this holiday of Shavuot is the holiday where we look very carefully at the 10 Commandments. One of my favorite pieces in her whole mosaic, aside from the little embellishments that she put in between, is the fact that the entire mosaic is set on a Torah scroll that is open with the ends of the scrolls at each end. So we start with the bris and we end with old age. We don't talk about death to little children, but we do talk about old age, grandparents, what's it like? And I said to Robin, I'm going to bring you to the Schaefer campus. I want you to see what our ark looks like. And I want you to see if you can replicate that ark in your mosaic. And boy, did she do it. And that scene shows a grandfather being led up by two more generations, his daughter with baby in arms, which says to our children, our religious school students, our teens, and our parents and our members who walk through the doors, that we are a synagogue that honors Lador Vador from generation to generation. Next slide, please. So before I turn it over to Rabbi Jessica, who has been walking around so beautifully, showing you up close and personal, I want to start by thanking Rabbi Jessica. You and I worked on our first art project together back in 2006, when I had this epiphany and created a year-long series of events called Art Gala. And it was really the first time that I really had worked with you, even though you had been at the congregation for a while. And I was enthralled with your talent, your passion, your knowledge of art. And I've been so blessed to work with you on these 3 classes. I want to thank Jeanette and Jodi and Amy for what you've done for both of our campuses and for being here today to share your creativity and your background and all the things that make you you and make your art spectacular. And I want to thank everybody for being here for the last 3 sessions. I want to remind everybody that if you saw something today that you really like and you think that you might like to dedicate it, please call me or please call Derek Hurwitz, because we have many dedications of art and mezuzot left. Rabbi Jessica?
So it's appropriate that we ended with the mosaic because Susan is a person of detail, tile by tile, flourish by flourish, biography by biography, artist by artist. Susan's incredible attention to detail is unreal. And yet when you step back far away, you see the synagogue, Temple Beth, that Susan and her husband Barry and her whole family are so devoted to. It has been an utter pleasure to be with you for these journeys through these artists. This whole 3-part lunch and learn will be saved. So if you think there's someone who would like to see and learn more about the artists, it is like meeting an author of a book or an author of a piece of poetry, to sit with an artist and understand their creative process, visit them at home, hear their thoughts and who inspires them and the stories of their family and the future generations that they create for has been unbelievable. God willing, the day will come again very soon when we can all be together and witness these works of art in person. But until that time, we can't thank you all enough for coming on this journey with the artists of the creative space of Temple Beth. Thank you and stay safe and well.